The following is an example using IntelliBid to take off a low voltage estimate. Now, on the screen here is the takeoff screen, and what you're able to establish at the beginning is a work breakdown structure for a project. Now, using this phase tree in IntelliBid, you're able to assign, as an example, the different systems that you may be bidding on, so you can add and delete different main tasks or systems. But then the physical construction of a project is really important. As an example, breaking a job down by IDF, IDF number 1, IDF number 2, and so forth. Effectively breaking it down even further into phases or areas for the project. But what you have here is not only the workstation cabling task of the job, but you've also got the TR buildouts for IDF1. You've got the fiber backbone that would be pulled into IDF number 1. Each of these tasks define your work breakdown schedule. Now, what you're able to do from there is also establish certain tasks that require overtime or shift. So as an example, maybe we're going to need to work the 3rd floor or IDF number 3 for overtime. Now, when we've created our work breakdown structure, what you have here is an effective use to be able to toggle through the different tasks on the job. So we'll start off with IDF number 1. We can go into a library of materials that are broken into a series of different low voltage installations. We've got inside plant and outside plant assemblies, but there's over 60 to 80,000 items at this point. They tend to go up and down based on items being deleted and added at different times, but these are the different areas: work area, copper cable, fiber cable, terminating testing, racks and enclosures and so forth. So a lot of different areas. In fact, you can create your own catalog of information. You're able to import items from your own spreadsheet to build up your own custom and competitive database inside IntelliBid. Now, as an example, we have a lot of assemblies, but a lot of our customers come from spreadsheets doing manual estimating. So I'm going to show you to take off your manual items probably for the last time, capture them as your own custom assemblies, and change the way you're going to estimate going forward. Much more quicker, much more consistent, as I'll show you. Now, with the IDF number 1 here, I've got basically a folder that I can come into the materials database and find some material. And what I want to do is take off a 1 voice 2 data drop, workstation drop. I'm going to use, it's going to be a 1 voice 2 data, Cat5e for voice and Cat6 for data, using plenum rated cable, and I'm going to use a Hubble Mohawk solution. So in the database, I'm going to go to the work area portion of the job, and you can, database, and see the different catalogs based on manufacturers that we have, and I'm going to go to the Hubble premise. Inside here, you'll see materials just related to the work area, jacks, faceplates, outlets, frames, adapter plates, and so forth. So I'm going to grab a Infinity style single gang faceplate by Hubble, and there's different ports here. I'm going to grab a 4-port white faceplate that you can see here. Just simply point, click, and enter the quantity. Now, a lot of estimators, manual methods, Excel spreadsheets, you would have counted up all these outlets on the drawing and entered 563 outlets. But we're just going to build the individual drop that's required, or the network configuration. So we want a single faceplate. We're going to use a 4-port for design, and then use and populate that faceplate now with some 5e jacks, Cat6 jacks, as I'd mentioned in our quick specification for the demonstration. I'm going to use white Cat 5e jack for the voice, and I'm just going to populate it with one jack. I'm going to go to the Cat 6 section and select the blue jacks, and I want to use two jacks. As I said, a one voice, two data jack, or outlet. Now, I'm also going to move to the copper cable section, and I want to use Hubble Mohawk on the cable, 4-pair UTP Cat 5e, riser or plenum rated. In this case, I'll use a white plenum rated cable with 150 foot cable average, two Cat 6 plenum blue cables. 150 times 2 would be 300 feet for those two cables. And now I'm also going to go to a terminate test in label section to do a certified solution with complete with testing and labeling. I want to test a Cat 5 single cable and two Cat 6 cables on the testing side. And when I get to the labeling, I also want to label at the work area a single voice, two data, and the termination at the IDF. I'm going to put them all on patch panels. They'll all be terminated on patch panels, that is, so I'm going to use 3 labels at the IDF. Now I can continue adding material from the database. You'll see that some items have some pricing, some are labor only. In fact, the cable testing and so forth here, we wouldn't have any material pricing, but we've got built-in labor units for the installations. The material pricing is going to be either project priced, but it's actually very specific to your own company, and I'll show you to create a quick bill of material here in a moment that we can get a report to send out as a request for quote for this project. Now, these items, as selected, built our one voice, two data drop. Simply highlighting these items, you can right-click with your mouse and select the temporary assembly option and capture these or group them with what we call an assembly. This will be a temporary assembly at this point, but it's an assembly that groups common materials or a kit of parts that you can actually name your assembly. In this case, one voice, two data, Cat 5e, Cat 6, Hubble Mohawk. And you're able to call it anything you want. And I'm just going to delete these items and show you that as simply as highlighting and capturing a group of items like a equipment rack, 7-foot open rack with the anchors and shots, and for the anchoring of that open rack with the fender washers and hex nuts, whatever you're going to have to anchor it. You can have a number 6 ground lug, 10 feet of number 6 insulated ground, a power bar, vertical managers, horizontal managers, but that could be a typical rack that you install. Instead of going into the system and always grabbing those parts and pieces, you're able to capture them as a kit. So now, when I've got this catalog with my first assembly built right on the fly for IDF number 1, select the quantity. Maybe there's that 563 that I mentioned earlier, and taking all those parts off, and all the quantities have been multiplied out. Now there is with the material that's presently in the database, and there is looks like the cable pricing is missing here on these two cables, but the extended material dollars and built-in labor units that extend out labor hours have been totaled down here at the bottom. Now I can simply select to the second floor, or IDF number 2, and enter a new quantity. Maybe there's 326 on the second floor. Now, quickly now, move to the third floor, and now there's 125. Now that was the area that we had been required to do the overtime, but that brings up the labor on the job at right now 3,244 hours, 400 hours just for IDF number 3, and $22,000 in change in material overall. Now, when a job is typically, unfortunately, starting to lose money, it's typically because the labor hours have overrun on a project. Now, these 3,240 hours, looking at the 3 floors and bidding a job like it's constructed and using your work breakdown structure, look at the job in terms of that physical construction, in terms of the difficulty in labor. Now, IDF number 1 may be a 40-foot ceiling. IDF number 2 might be a gutted office floor with a 12-foot deck, and IDF number 3 might be a occupied floor, and this is the area that is requiring the overtime. The owner's occupied, T-bar ceiling and so forth, where you're having to remove and reinstall and so forth. So much more different conditions for each one of the areas. This is a baseline for the installation. Conest has NECA standards for normal, difficult, and very difficult. We've got a competitive column here for commercial standards, but every job is a little different. These are the overall job conditions. Look at the different tasks now. On the 3rd floor as an example, or the 1st floor, if we had a 40-foot ceiling, the faceplates and jacks really are not affected, or the cable testing or labeling should not be affected by that 40-foot ceiling. What is affected is the 4-pair UTP cable placement here. And our labor units, even though, albeit a standard, users can create their own standard in the database, but this is a guide to start with. But we use a factor column instead of erasing the line on the labor standard. Keep the standard intact and let the estimate, or identifying the estimate, how far above or below from the standard the project is in terms of the difficulty. So in a case like this, I may decide in a 40-foot ceiling that the cable placement might warrant doubling the hours. Now, we went from 3,244 hours and very quickly shot up to the 4,486 hours. But we only did it in 2 lines on the estimate, and not the rest of this individual task. Now, the 2nd floor, it's a gutted office floor. We look at our labor units as working off an 8-foot stepladder in an unoccupied area. So we've identified that 40-foot ceiling, but we're right within our standard here. We get to the 3rd floor. This is a fully occupied area. In fact, the factor that I want to put on this will warrant me, just with a quick cut and paste here to show you quickly, is that I believe, without having a system know everything about the labor, I'm looking at the occupancy of a floor and need to make some further judgments from the labor units that are in the system, and I decide to look at the entire floor as a difficulty overall for every piece of the installation. In fact, you're able to come in here and identify why the labor has been factored up as an occupied premise. And you can see when a user has made an adjustment here, it also shows it in red, but showing management where that risk is over and above the standard. So in fact, we would go to the 1st floor and insert that comment as being a 40-foot ceiling. Our estimate at 3,244 hours is now at 4,600 or 4,606. Now, moving through the estimate, we would go to the summary page and very quickly see the line item quantities that we have for the cable and so forth, and the jacks and the faceplate. Quickly send out a material cost request that can move this material into an Excel spreadsheet with no labor units, manufacturer catalog numbers, and send it to your supplier to get a project price based on the quantity and of the project. You can either update the project with that utility pricing or that material cost request through a utility built into the system. You can just manually put your project prices in here, or even more effectively is using the net price of service that can work directly with your local supplier to update in a matter of seconds with your current local suppliers. Now, these prices that are in here, they'll be project related. You can store prices in the database to have some standard prices, but project pricing usually is a requirement on every job. And if this job is negotiated over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 months, or maybe shelved during that period, when you come back into that project 6, 8 months, the project price that you used would have been intact. So let me just throw a quick price in here on the cable to push up the quantities to have a little bit more realistic numbers. Now we've got total quantities in the bid recap of the project. We're able to put in equipment rental, maybe a 30-foot scissor lift for that high ceiling, and you can get a quote, put a vendor or rental equipment, but I'm just going to throw in $1,500 for this project. I can also assign this right to a specific area. I'm doing the cabling on the first IDF, and that's where I want the dollars to be allocated. Now, you'll also see here there's 520 hours that were allotted to be done on an overtime, and that's that third floor. 4,606 hours, but 520 of those are for overtime. Based on prevailing wage or whatever your wage package is, you're able to store some rates in here. Let me just use some round numbers. Burden percentages, fringes, fully loaded rates. 100% technician, $41 an hour, $167,000 in labor cost, plus the overtime hours at 520 times your labor rate for that. Now you can store these labor rates. I entered them now, but they can be stored as a template so you don't have to put your company rates in. Look at the numbers in terms of normal competitiveness or non-competitiveness. That is, if 100% technicians could be allowed for a project without losing the project to your competitor. Maybe you want to blend the crew, so you have $167,000 right now in labor costs, but take the crew and have 5 men as a requirement, 1 foreman, 2 journeymen, or 2 technicians, 2 cable installers. It blends those crew mix across the hours, multiplying by these labor rates. But first, instead of a $41 an hour rate, it shows a $36 and $40 rate, and so it drops the labor rate down to $148,700. So a number of $1,000s off this, which can make yourself more competitive and provide some what-if scenarios of how far you need to go based on the market. Now, indirect labor, project management time. Put some time to manage the project. CAD operator, non-working personnel, mobilization labor, badging in, badging out every day, real strict restrictions on labor forces moving through the building, and even restrictions on and or the loading dock material handling. So projects that have issues where you could be losing 15% of your manpower, and through those conditions you would be able to account for them at the estimate level. Direct job cost. You've got permit fees, parking, per diem costs. You can put user-defined descriptions here, but these are just descriptions that we have out of the box. Final price, you look right down column E. You'll see with your tax, again, you'll store a number of different company templates with your labor rates and taxes for different regions or MAC clients that you deal with, different states and counties and so forth, prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon wages. You can have these stored, so not having put these common costs in. Now, the material totaled, your labor totaled, equipment and subcontractors, we didn't put any direct job cost. And line number 16 is your prime cost at $423,980. Your accountant would usually let you know what your overhead is for the company operations, which would be added to the job, totaling $462,000, which is your true cost to do this job before any fee or profit. Try to put some fair, competitive profit on the job. I'm just going to put a flat 15 across. You may have a bond on the job to include, but right now we're have a price to go to the street at $531,460. Our work breakdown schedule, albeit a simple one system installation, but the $531,000 is broken into the 3 IDFs with overhead and profit, material sell prices broken all down. This has got your overhead but no profit, so you can negotiate or use this as your walkaway number to help negotiate, but not go below something where your cost is. And again, provide a number of breakouts. Use this as a schedule of values and export it to Excel for project management, and take your project with 4,600 hours and be able to run a number of reports. But one of them that as an internal report is basically looking at your work breakdown structure, simple as it is in this project with 3 IDFs and just the cabling drops. You've got IDF number 1 with all the quantities and descriptions, material units, labor units, total hours for each one of the project tasks. So very simple, short demonstration of the power of the IntelliBid software to do some low voltage takeoffs.